Hello and welcome to Little Rock Scripture Studies, Women in the New Testament. I'm Amy A.K., and I'm looking forward to embarking on this biblical exploration with you, along with the author of your commentary, Catherine Cory, and our other video lecturers, Diana McAlintal, a liturgist, author, and co-founder of Team RCIA, Sherry Brown, professor of New Testament at Creighton University, and Kaki Upchurch, former director of Little Rock Scripture Study and editor of the Little Rock Catholic Study Bible. I'd like to start by highlighting a few of my favorite things about this study, things I hope you will also find helpful and meaningful. First, let's take a look at the study's table of contents, and I think you'll see that we're in for something special. Notice that while several lessons in our study will cover multiple women from the New Testament, such as women healed by Jesus in Lesson 2, and some of the lesser-known women of the New Testament in Lesson 6, in our other lessons, we'll take the time to study several women in depth, with entire lessons dedicated to Mary, the mother of Jesus, the Samaritan woman at the well, Mary and Martha of Bethany, and Mary Magdalene. These deep dives into the lives of these women of the Gospels will allow us to really slow down, to examine the biblical texts that shed light on who they were and who they continue to be for us as contemporary believers. For example, in Lesson 1 on Mary, the mother of Jesus, we'll examine what the individual Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles tell us about Mary, and how these texts shed light on Mary as the mother of Jesus and ultimately the mother of the church. Lesson 4 on Mary and Martha of Bethany will help us sort out these stories in Luke and John about these sisters who are explicitly called friends of Jesus. And Lesson 5 on Mary Magdalene will unpack the gospel texts about this fascinating woman who was mischaracterized as a prostitute and sinner for centuries, an interpretation completely divorced from the gospel texts about her. A real standout among these deep dives is Lesson 3 on the Samaritan woman at the well. It's not often that we get to examine this account from John's Gospel in such depth. In this lesson, Catherine Cory will take us through this colorful scene, first giving us some helpful historical and cultural background on the relationship between Jews and Samaritans at the time of Jesus, then alerting us to some of the literary techniques used in John's Gospel, and then taking due time to unpack the very interesting conversation between Jesus and this inquisitive woman, to better understand what she's asking Jesus, to consider the many ways she addresses Jesus, and to enter into her joy as she runs to tell others what she has heard and seen, an evangelist in her own right. Of course, going in depth on some of the major women of the New Testament doesn't mean we'll ignore other women. Between your commentary, special inserts throughout the study, and video lectures, we think we've covered just about everyone. From the women in Matthew's genealogy of Jesus, to the women characters in Jesus' parables, to the minor characters of the Acts of the Apostles, such as Rhoda, the maid in Acts 12, who was so excited to see Peter freed from prison that she forgot to open the gate and let him into the house. Besides deep dives and a thorough approach, there are several other things I'd like to highlight about this study. The first is the questions you'll find throughout the commentary. And here, I'm not referring to the questions at the end of each lesson, though of course, those are wonderful too, and will provide opportunities for you to reflect on what you're learning and have rich discussions with others. But here, I'm specifically referring to places throughout the commentary text where the author purposefully asks questions, inviting you to slow down and ponder for a few moments to decide what you think about something, or to consider how what you've just read might impact your life. These open-ended questions are like gems you'll scoop up along the path of your study, as I know they'll prompt you to some deep thinking and prayer. Something else Catherine Cory does throughout this study is to offer some of her own translations of scripture texts along the way. In these cases, the author is reading the original Greek texts, and rather than drawing upon the NABRE translation that is included in your book, or another English translation such as the NRSV, She is translating the text herself, helping us understand either a particular nuance of the original Greek text, or perhaps offering more of a literal reading than we often have in our standard translations. These quite literal translations can be eye-opening, as they help us hear and read these biblical texts anew. One of my favorite examples comes in Lesson 2, in Luke's account of a woman who is described as bent over. Your commentary helps us imagine what it was like to live with a spine bent and fixed in one position, and to reflect on Jesus' initiative in laying hands on this woman who could only see his feet and not his face. At the end of this account, the NABRE text says that the woman at once stood up straight and glorified God. But Cory tells us that the Greek text literally says, immediately she was straightened out and kept on praising God. I love this straightening out image. It further sparks my imagination about how life changed for this woman because of the compassion of Jesus the healer. She didn't just stand up straight, she was straightened out. And she didn't just glorify God, she kept on praising God. May we all be straightened out by this healer from Nazareth, and may we all keep on praising him. I hope these highlights have helped to prepare you for the journey ahead. You'll learn a lot, but you'll also have plenty of time to ponder, pray, and discuss these wonderful biblical texts and the women they explore. Our commentary will highlight many of the challenges and biases women faced in the ancient world, but it will also emphasize the strength and sacredness of these women. They were special, and yet in many ways they were just like us, individuals who lived in a particular time and place, who did not have full control over their lives, who encountered Christ or the gospel message and made decisions about what they would believe and how they would respond. And they did this in many different ways, just like we do. As you begin your study of women in the New Testament, I'll leave you with one of the simplest, most powerful images of a woman in the gospel texts. And that is the image of Mary of Bethany sitting at the feet of Jesus. Now for us, the idea of sitting at someone's feet may sound demeaning, but in the ancient world, it was a privileged place. To sit at the feet of a teacher was to be a disciple. Mary was bold to do such a thing, and yet I imagine it was love that moved her to be so bold. And Jesus did not question her choice, he affirmed it. Not only was it the right thing to do, it was, according to Jesus, the one thing that mattered. So too for us. Our lives are complicated, busy, full, but there's only one thing that truly matters: listening, learning, loving, sitting at the feet of Jesus, not so we can stay there forever, but so we too can go out into the world as disciples.